Donkey Kong is easily the most influential character in gaming history, sparking a franchise lasting more than 40 years and even predating the immutable legacy of Mario. This monstrous primate, while simple in appearance, is responsible for saving Nintendo from the brink of financial collapse, educating the youth of the 90s, and fostering a cult-like following in its own subgenre of internet memes. But where did the idea for our disgruntled hairy friend originate? Why is a monkey called Donkey Kong? And will the new version of this game be able to hold its own after launch? Today, we're going to cover all that and more. This is the complete history of every Donkey Kong game ever made. Donkey Kong was a wildly unique game in the 1980s, considering that home computing and personal game systems were barely becoming the norm. This game is easily one of the most important pieces of gaming history, as this is not only Mario's first appearance in a game, but technically he wasn't called Mario yet. He was known as Jumpman. It might be simple mechanically, but the idea of chasing after a damsel in distress while jumping over barrels and climbing scaffolding is so insanely addictive, you almost forget this game is more than 40 years old. Another interesting fact about this game is the origin story. Nintendo tried launching a game called Radar Scope in 1979, which featured an almost isometric 2.5D landscape and played similarly to Space Invaders. But it ended up being a colossal failure and put Nintendo of America in danger of financial ruin. So they somehow conjured up the idea of a giant monkey holding a woman hostage, and it sold like hotcakes. If that's not a testament to building a better mousetrap, I don't know what is. This game was remarkably unique because it was one of very few arcade games to include cutscenes. In fact, this game was so revolutionary for its day, it became the second highest grossing game of 1981 and 1982. It was also ported to a number of other systems like the ColecoVision and the Game & Watch, which we'll cover later. For now, Nintendo was back on top. And this time, so was Mario. That's right, Donkey Kong Jr. launches in arcades everywhere, but this time with a twist. Nintendo quickly developed a sixth sense for their customers and not only flipped the script for Donkey Kong 1, making Jumpman the villain, but they also crowned him with the infamous name Mario. Jumpman was no more, and a timeless legacy was born. This time, Nintendo really upped their game. Mario has Donkey Kong trapped in a cage, and it's your job to play as his son, appropriately named Donkey Kong Jr., and save him from the perilous challenges therein. You can really tell Nintendo put their back into this one with platforms scattered about, ropes for you to climb, a water hazard at the bottom of the level, and of course, Mario being an absolute menace and doing everything to sabotage your efforts. Something interesting about this game was the fall damage aspect. If you fall from a high point and smack the ground, you automatically die, which does feel appropriate, but it's still really cool to see that concept in a game from this era. Also, little fun fact for you, the levels you're seeing on screen were initially meant to be part of the original Donkey Kong released the prior year. Developer Shigeru Miyamoto had big dreams of including these concepts in the first game, but they became far too challenging to implement, so the dev team decided to iron out the details and release them later in Donkey Kong Jr. In other words, the original Donkey Kong could have been far more complex, but would that have helped Nintendo? Or hurt them? We may never know. Another interesting fact about Miyamoto, he originally wanted Donkey Kong to be the star of the first game, which could have easily changed the direction of the series as we know it, but the developers found it challenging to make such a large character maneuver the screen and scrapped this idea. So they had their limitations in the first game and worked with those limitations in the second game by compromising with a smaller character that was easier to animate and program. But what about the third Donkey Kong? Once again, creatively working within their limitations, Nintendo managed to make yet another hit with Donkey Kong 3 releasing just 2 years after their most profitable arcade game to date. The game takes the series in a completely new direction with no Junior or Mario to be found, but instead we get to meet Stanley, a pest controller plagued by the biggest pest of them all. Players have to navigate a mostly static environment while avoiding bugs of all sorts and the resulting shrapnel that comes from killing them, which adds an extra layer of difficulty. Unfortunately, this game, while novel in function, was rather repetitive. Now, there was an attempt at a face-saving sequel released the same year, but not by Nintendo. More on that later. For Donkey Kong 3, the same level designs were used over and over, which was not uncommon for the time due to technical limitations, but this game was a complete shift as it wasn't a platformer and didn't offer a ton of movement to the player compared to the previous two titles. Regardless, Donkey Kong 3 was well received at the time of its release, but as time progressed, dedicated fans and critics alike scrutinized the lack of series consistency with this title, and more importantly, the absence of Mario. While the tabloids of the 80s praised this new venture for Nintendo, things weren't going to stay perfect forever. Arcades were slowly losing customers as the home computing era was beginning. Even video game consoles were losing momentum. In 1983, home video game revenue peaked at around $3.2 billion, then collapsed to an abysmal $100 million by 1985. In just a few short years, Nintendo had recovered from near financial ruin, exploded in popularity with back-to-back hit titles, and suddenly was facing imminent doom along with every other game company of the day. So they did what any innovative game developer would do and got creative. The edutainment industry was meant to bridge the gap between enjoyable video games and education, mainly for children. In the early 1980s, game developers across the country tried their hands at making the next big educational product in the hopes of leading the charge and solidifying their positions in the market. Nintendo saw this demand and decided to use their newfound success with the Donkey Kong franchise and created Donkey Kong Jr. Math. The game was launched on their newly released Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, and featured very simple gameplay involving basic math questions to be solved by the player. Typically, Donkey Kong holds up a sign with a total number you need to reach using addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. However, sometimes he's holding up your total points while you try to solve basic subtraction problems in the most confusing way possible. The mechanics were clunky, arduous, and left gamers confused, and even less educated than they were before starting DK Jr. Math. Reviewers tore this title apart, and Nintendo declared it a complete failure. This was also the only game ever released as part of Nintendo's Education series in North America. However, there is still some interesting history behind this title. For example, this game used the same engine as Donkey Kong Jr. and was originally supposed to be the first of 3 games for the Nintendo Education series. The next game planned after this was going to be Donkey Kong's Music Play, which we'll cover soon. As for the third game, it was likely scrapped along with the Education series and only exists as a forgotten memory. DK Jr. Math was initially launched with the Sharp C1 NES TV, a combination television entertainment system retailing for 93,000 yen, or about $600 US. There was also a combination cartridge released exclusively in Japan for the Sharp NES TV called Donkey Kong Jr. plus Junior Math Lesson, which, while sounding like a good deal offering 2 games at once, actually had some shortcomings. For instance, in DK Jr., certain stages were removed entirely. There was no longer a cutscene for beating Stage 4, and the game was, by default, set to the highest difficulty. In DK Jr. Math, Donkey Kong remains caged for the entire game, and it's never explained why, and these birds called nitpickers no longer appear in this version. This was certainly not Nintendo's finest work, and definitely left them limping away with their monkey tails between their legs, but it didn't stop their creative drive. You might say their next title was intense. Circus tents, that is. Available only for the Game & Watch console and released in 1984, Donkey Kong Circus is considered one of the rarest titles in the series. This game is remarkably simple. Donkey Kong balances on a barrel, attempting to catch falling pineapples while dodging fireballs. If he touches a fireball, he is mocked by his now famous nemesis Mario and given a miss. If he gets 3 misses, the game is over. However, if he can reach 300 points, all misses, if any, are cleared, and Donkey Kong can carry on. If you're dedicated enough to get absolutely no misses and reach 300 points, you get double points until you do get a miss. This game, despite being generally unknown to casual DK fans, is incredibly significant to the series. This is the first known point in DK history where Donkey Kong is a playable character, a stellar upgrade from earlier versions we've discussed. This game also has a unique history with Nintendo, as it was originally based on a game called Egg, released in 1981. Egg was the foundation for Nintendo's future work with Donkey Kong on the Game & Watch. But before they did that, they acquired a Disney license and released the first ever Mickey Mouse game for the handheld console. While this does sound ambitious and certainly profitable, Nintendo made a grave mistake that they refused to acknowledge for quite some time. The model numbers for Mickey Mouse and Donkey Kong Circus are so similar, consumers were sometimes confused when shopping for the right title. It's been theorized that this, in addition to the lackluster gameplay on what was a colorless screen at the time, led to the downfall of DK Circus. Still, they didn't do too bad. Unconfirmed sales figures put a rough estimate at about 250,000 units sold and about $12 million in revenue. One thing that Nintendo does better than anyone is persist stubbornly through the downtimes. Despite the unimpressive sales figures from Donkey Kong Circus, they continued their development endeavors for the Game & Watch console and released Donkey Kong Hockey later that same year. Continuing with the successful formula of man versus primate, this game features both Donkey Kong and Mario going head-to-head on the ice. This was also one of few games made for the Game & Watch that featured multiplayer capabilities so you and a friend could battle it out one-on-one. The goal is simple. If you're playing against the computer, you're going against Donkey Kong attempting to score 10 points before he does, otherwise it's game over. However, you can also play Game B, which means you and a friend can be either character and do the same. Simple for the time, but uniquely fascinating. Donkey Kong Hockey proved to Nintendo that while the handheld market has some interest, there's something else needed to make another bombshell game release like they did only a few years prior.
Video game companies has revitalized the classic just in time to make it on Santa's list. This is a new 3D version of Nintendo's Donkey Kong. More than 2 million have been pre-sold to retailers.
And 10 years later, that's exactly what they did. Nintendo spent most of the late 80s and early 90s porting various titles to different systems since they knew their customers had a vested interest in the Donkey Kong legacy. But with the explosion of the NES's popularity since its release in 1985, Nintendo also knew they had another goldmine on their hands. Donkey Kong Country was revolutionary for the series and the games industry as a whole, winning Game of the Year when it first released and shipping with a Player's Choice certificate included in the box a year later. This game is also credited by many as the reason for the developer Rare becoming a household name in game development. Not only is the gameplay addicting and unique, but it's also one of the first games to use pre-rendered sprites, allowing for a three-dimensional appearance. This game utilized 3D models made by Silicon Graphics, who later struck a deal with Nintendo to design a powerful graphics processor for the beloved Nintendo 64 console. Donkey Kong Country was wildly successful, selling just over 8 million units and sparking a long-standing cult-like obsession with the series it created. In fact, demand was so high for this series, it even got its own separate version made just for competitions, but more on that later. For now, let's talk about a game that's often mistaken as the Game Boy port of Donkey Kong Country.
He's the beast you loved on Super NES. And now we've captured him on Game Boy in an all-new game with all new enemies and worlds. Donkey Kong Land. New for Game Boy and Super Game Boy.
Due to the rapid release of titles throughout the 90s, many average Nintendo fans experienced confusion between games, often mistaking Donkey Kong Land as the portable version of Donkey Kong Country, but they couldn't have been more wrong. While it was the handheld follow-up and pseudo-sequel to the newly successful DK Country, it had its own storyline and gameplay differences that made it unique. The game is hilariously self-aware, and its story breaks the fourth wall in an almost Deadpool-like fashion, with Cranky Kong reappearing and challenging Donkey and Diddy Kong to replicate the same success on the Game Boy that they just had on the NES, and then King K. Rool and the Kremlings steal their banana horde once again. Gameplay is similar to Donkey Kong Country, which arguably makes this game more impressive, considering the power of the Game Boy's hardware. Players could choose to play as Donkey or Diddy at will, but only one can be displayed on screen at a time. There are also a few cameos of familiar faces, with Rambi the Rhinoceros and Espresso the Ostrich making appearances, although Espresso is rarely seen throughout the game. This title inspired its own brand of sequels, later leading to Donkey Kong Land 2 and 3, but the interesting part about this version is the DK barrels being on the ground. This is the only version where that happens. Then there's the puzzling mystery of Rambunctious. He was supposed to be an animal buddy, replacing Rambi, and even had the art featured in an early edition of Nintendo Power, but was scrapped at the last minute. Nintendo has never confirmed why. The mystery of unused characters in this game continues with the published artwork of Paka, a planned underwater enemy that never saw the light of day or the Game Boy Color's LCD screen. Lastly, there was a strange alternate version of DK shown wearing a fedora, looking a bit more intimidating than the original favorite primate. Once again, this curious spin-off never came to fruition and wasn't even given a name, so fans dubbed him Fedora Kong and left him behind as a memory. Donkey Kong Land received glowing reviews across the board, with some minor criticism about the gameplay similarities between it and its NES prequel, but the consensus was generally positive and further improved the Donkey Kong legacy. Nintendo had hit their stride and become unstoppable. Sticking with their successful formula, Nintendo released a unique twist on the DK Country legacy with Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Conquest. This time, it's just Diddy and Dixie against the world. As graphics improved, so did gameplay. Players can use Dixie's helicopter ability to reach faraway platforms when needed, offering a fun twist on the usual mechanics. Both characters also have a special team-up ability when both are present on screen, allowing one to throw the other as a weapon of sorts to combat enemies. There is also a considerable expansion on the types of barrels in the game. These innovations were very successful, as this game is the 6th best-selling SNES title in history, a true mark of video game design by Nintendo. On the other hand, Donkey Kong Land 2, available exclusively on the Game Boy at launch, had a few notable differences from its unofficial prequel. For example, due to Game Boy hardware limitations, only one protagonist can be displayed on screen at a time. The instruction manual for this game was also riddled with errors, with some sections stating if a cannonball is placed in a cannon, it will flash. But the Game Boy's hardware did not support this. Furthermore, it's stated that players can swim with the B button, but it's actually done by pressing A. The list goes on and the errors are extensive, and it certainly speaks to the credibility of Nintendo's QA team. Many have speculated that this manual was a direct copy of the DK Country 2 manual with minor changes. Efficiency is understandable in the business world and is a normal part of streamlining processes, but this left players feeling confused and wondering what Nintendo was thinking when proofreading everything before the full release. Despite the notable confusion from DK fans, Nintendo persisted with unrelenting ferocity and in 1996 released Donkey Kong Country 3 for the SNES. This time, Dixie Kong is the star of the show and is joined by a new protagonist, Kiddy Kong. The dynamic duo fight their way through each stage, with the main goal being to raise the flag at the end of the level while taking on various obstacles throughout the Cremisphere. By this point, hardcore DK fans noticed a trend with all DK Country games. The plot was stagnant. In the first game, Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong rescue their bananas from King K. Rool. In the second game, Diddy and Dixie Kong have to save Donkey Kong from King K. Rool. In the third installment, Dixie and Kiddy Kong have to rescue Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong from a mysterious new leader of the Kremlings known as, you guessed it, King K. Rool. Aside from the obvious repetition, which could easily be chalked up to Nintendo capitalizing on a successful formula, the graphics are pretty stellar. The water effects, the lighting, the gameplay mechanics, it's all well and good. The reception was generally pretty positive with some minor criticism, but that's to be expected with any game release. Overall, this title is a great way to feature a strong female lead and introduce a new character to the Kongiverse. Continuing with the incredibly popular spin-off saga, Nintendo released the third and final installment of the series with Donkey Kong Land 3 for the Game Boy. The gameplay is familiar once again, with only one main character being present on screen at a time, but both offer unique abilities to overcome various challenges. Despite the repeated formula, there are some curious facts behind this game, such as the original subtitle. Before the final release, this game was titled Donkey Kong Land 3: The Race Against Time, but was modified to a simpler version, likely to avoid confusion and to remain on brand for the Kong Land legacy. There was also a Game Boy Color version of this game released exclusively in Japan, known as Donkey Kong GB, Dinky Kong, and Dixie Kong. However, the reasoning behind its limited regional release is unknown. This game also features what is considered the final official appearance of Kiddy Kong in the entire series. At this point, it appears Nintendo became aware that the DK Country legacy needed to come to a close. They had 3 major installments, all successful along with complementary titles, which is certainly nothing to discount, but they knew they needed something a bit more exciting. With the immense success of their new Nintendo 64 console released in 1996, these guys knew they had yet another goldmine on their hands. And in 1997, they made a franchise change that left the competition eating their dust. Diddy Kong Racing was a fresh new start for Nintendo, featuring races on every terrain: air, land, sea, and even snow. This game was so successful, it sold 800,000 copies only 2 weeks before Christmas in 1997. Considering it launched just 1 week before Thanksgiving, that is no small feat. This is also the point where Nintendo's graphics began to look timeless. Sure, previous DK games do look amazing and are certainly still playable, But the bright colors, music, and sound effects in DK Racing really set this title apart from its predecessors. Then there's the game mechanics. Diddy Kong Racing features a total of 10 playable characters, 8 of which are available by default, and 2 that you have to unlock. There are also 3 different types of vehicles for different terrain. Cars for land, hovercrafts for water or land, and of course, planes for air. But it gets better. Each character and vehicle has different strengths and weaknesses, sometimes in combination. For example, Crunch normally has poor steering, but his steering is higher in a hovercraft due to that vehicle's emphasis on weight. In other words, choosing the right combination is key to winning a race. Choosing different cars for various benefits is common in racing games and has been for decades, but the emphasis on different drivers is what really puts this title in its own league. What's interesting is how this game almost wasn't included in the DK legacy. Originally, it was going to be called Pro-Am 64 and be presented as a sequel to RC Pro-Am made by Rare. Thankfully, Rare and Nintendo had the bright idea to keep the Donkey Kong heritage going, and it was one of the best decisions they ever made. Before the turn of the century, Nintendo decided to give the Donkey Kong Country series one last hurrah on its newly successful console by releasing Donkey Kong 64 in 1999. Despite being the only game in the series without the word country included, it's still considered an official sequel following the events of Donkey Kong Land 3. This time, things are a bit more expansive. Instead of just 2 Kongs, players can choose one of up to 5 Kongs to play, but only after they're unlocked. The plot is familiar, with King K. Rool being the main villain yet again, but it doesn't matter. The story works well, and the graphics work even better, with Nintendo utilizing every ounce of horsepower present in the 64 to make each level a beautiful 3D challenge. The game almost feels targeted towards video game completionists, as each level contains 25 golden bananas, with each Kong being required to capture 5 bananas apiece. Completionists love to explore and grab every item possible with new games, and it's clear the developers knew this mechanic would motivate players to obsessively focus on each and every corner they could find. This game also features a cleverly named in-game currency known as Banana Bunch Coins, which players can use to pay for services from NPKs or non-player Kongs, such as Funky, Candy, or Cranky Kong. There are also 2 multiplayer modes included, like the King of the Hill style Battle Arena mode and the much more intense Monkey Smash Deathmatch mode. For the really ambitious, there's the unlockable Crush a Kong, who is only available in multiplayer mode and requires players to capture 15 banana fairies before he can be played. This game features a massive amount of content packed into one tiny cartridge. And speaking of tiny, this is the first game that doesn't include Dixie Kong at all. Instead, she's replaced by her sister, Tiny Kong. And of course, this video wouldn't be complete without mentioning the iconic and memeable DK rap.
Here we go. Performance for you. If you know the words, you can join in too. Put your hands together if you wanna clap as we take you through this monkey rap.
While Nintendo developers worked hard behind the scenes to port their classic titles to various consoles, a segment of the team was beating a different drum, or bongos to be specific. Music games, or what are sometimes called rhythm games, had a puzzling day in the sun in the early 2000s. Granted, there were some smaller titles before the turn of the century, but the peak really began with Donkey Konga in 2003. It wasn't their most successful title in comparison to past releases, but it was certainly novel and left behind an iconic controller for the recently released GameCube, the Donkey Kong Bongos. Stop Skeletons from Fighting has an excellent overview of the weirdness of this cultural staple, highlighting interesting tidbits like the secondary triggers in the bongos that never get used in any of the games it was designed for, as well as its use in other games by challenge streamers. The game was simple. Players tap the bongos in time with the music, aim for a perfect score, and progress to the next level and repeat until you either beat them all, or use your hard-earned coins to unlock minigames like the 100-meter vine climb, banana juggle, and bash King K. Rool. Reception was generally poor, save for a few reviewers. Even executives voiced their concerns over the game's gimmicky appeal. But for some reason, this game led to a cult-like following and remains a strong memory in the hearts of many adult gamers these days, which then led to 2 sequels, but only one of which actually made it to the United States. Nintendo was backed into a corner and grasping at straws. As with many companies when they get desperate, they get creative. In some cases, restrictions can lead to revolutionary products that change the entire future of a business. But in the case of Mario vs. Donkey Kong, things got weird. Released initially for the Game Boy Advance in 2004, Mario vs. Donkey Kong was an interesting attempt by Nintendo to revive the DK franchise. The game itself is straightforward. Mario climbs through various platform-style levels and needs to navigate to the end several times over through multiple worlds. Sounds normal, right? The plot is what makes this game unique. The game opens with Donkey Kong watching TV and seeing ads for mini Mario toys, and despite his apparent disgust with them, he still wants to collect them all. And he does. But being the big dumb ape that he is, he drops them all throughout the different worlds, and thus you have the reason for Mario to traverse each level. But the weird part is how the 7th level of each world, Mario plays sort of a mother duck figure to the 6 mini Marios he's collected and must guide them to safety, eventually leading to a face-off with, you guessed it, Donkey Kong. Amazingly, with the 23 years of history in this franchise for Nintendo at this point, this is the first game with Donkey Kong being a direct antagonist to Mario. Remember, in the first one, he wasn't Mario yet. This game also received favorable reviews in its day and managed to sell nearly 1.4 million copies. So, evidently, despite the weirdness, Nintendo was on to something. And then they decided to double down on the bongos. Donkey Konga 2 was similar to the first version. Actually, it was almost identical. There were 30 new songs added for everyone to enjoy, but many were covers and received harsh criticism as a result. Journalists took offense to the large selection of mostly Western titles as well, which only further impacted sales. Overall, this game was the same as the first, but a little more shiny. Still, it provided many with hours of fun, and today, a few minutes of nostalgia. Sticking with the brilliance of the DK bongos, Nintendo kept the barrel rolling and released Donkey Kong Jungle Beat in late 2004. This time, instead of keeping rhythm in classic Guitar Hero or DDR fashion, players get to use the almost full range of controls on the bongos to fight their way through the game. The clever use of iconic bongos led to positive reviews from critics around the world, many of whom took issue with the short length of the game, but still praised the innovation from Nintendo. And so did the players. Even today, major fans of the game, like Video Game Donkey, have plenty to say regarding the Jungle Beat legacy.
Where Donkey Kong Country was subtle and atmospheric, Jungle Beat was crazy and loud as hell. There is a Tony Hawk style combo system where the more tricks you do, the higher your multiplier goes, and your score is your health bar. I don't know why no other platformer has ever tried to do something like this, but it is genius. Even playing the Wii version, it is a very physical game. You can lose weight playing this game, okay? At the end of the level, Donkey Kong starts grabbing a trillion bananas, and then it zooms in on his face and goes, oh shit! Now you gotta fight Sumo Kong to death in a boxing match in outer space. This is the most violent, killingest, over-the-top, and exhausting Donkey Kong game there is. Instead of Funky Kong, you had Dread Kong. Instead of Booby Kong, you had Gloat Hog. And for this reason, the game was a commercial failure.
Despite the unimpressive sales figures, this game still cemented itself in the top 100 games for a Nintendo system in the 2006 edition of Nintendo Power. Remaining ever so versatile and unique, Nintendo devs decided to try their hands at making a short puzzle game exclusively for the Game Boy Advance in 2005. In fact, Adventure Mode in DK King of Swing is so short, the whole game can be completed in about 1 hour. Still, that didn't stop the positive feedback from critics. It used a clever mechanic on the GBA, focusing on just the left and right buttons at the top to move Donkey Kong around each level. Given the competition at the time, Nintendo knew they had to be different. The gameplay is a bit slower than previous titles, as Donkey Kong has more hang time than usual, but it's compensated for by the innovative yet challenging puzzle design. The various maps ranging from desert sandstorms to icy tundras made this memorable and charming for many Donkey Kong fans, but as time went on, Nintendo knew they needed to adapt to more cutting-edge systems. The Game Boy Advance and the Advance SP were still plenty popular, but the DS was on the rise, and with the recent release of the Wii, Nintendo had options, which led to the creation of this next title. The early to mid-2000s were a crazy time for games with innovation around every corner. You had Call of Duty, Sly Cooper, Spyro, a seemingly unlimited catalog was at your fingertips, and Nintendo knew that. If you had basic cable from 2004 to 2010, you might recall the constant promotion of 3DS games on TV. You could not get away from it. The concept of using two screens at the same time was fresh, exciting, and a little gimmicky, but that didn't stop Nintendo from doing what they do best. Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2 March of the Minis was dropped in late 2006 and offered a unique twist on the series. Instead of sticking with the traditional platform game formula, this title adopts something called Lemming-style gameplay, meaning instead of controlling Mario in his quest against Donkey Kong, you control the miniature toys throughout each level. Also, the roster was updated in this sequel as 3 new toys are introduced in the game, including Mini Donkey Kong, Mini Toad, and Mini Peach. This is also the first time we get to see Pauline since Donkey Kong released on the Game Boy in 1994. As part of Nintendo's promotional campaign for this game, they released a flash game called Mario vs. DK 2 Canon Chaos, which was minimalistic but offered plenty of entertainment to Donkey Kong and flash game enthusiasts alike. The touchscreen mechanics gained a lot of love for this title from numerous reviewers as it was a fun way to capitalize on the Nintendo DS's innovation as a system. On the subject of innovation, let's talk about the next title created exclusively for the Nintendo Wii. Kinetic movement mechanics became popular around the time of the Wii's initial debut, launching a fascinating time in gaming history. While games for the Nintendo DS used the touchscreen capabilities to their full advantage, the Wii offered a more involved aspect of gameplay. This, coupled with the release of Wii Sports, created arguably the most physically active time in gamers' lives until the debut of virtual reality headsets. Naturally, Nintendo knew how to utilize every aspect of the included Wii motes to fully engage their customers in their newest release, Donkey Kong Barrel Blast. This was more than just a racing game with impressive graphics, it was an immersive experience. If players wanted to accelerate, they had to shake their Wiimote and included nunchuck at the same time, and if they wanted to jump, they had to move their controls upwards. This created a unique and sometimes tiresome experience depending on the fitness level of the player, but it didn't stop the fun. This game also featured unique power-ups in colored balloons. Depending on the character you were playing, you needed to grab the corresponding colored balloon. For example, if you're on the Kong's team, you need to focus on the blue balloons to optimize your power-ups, and if you're on the Kremlin's team, aim for the red balloons instead. While this title does look pretty and offers some interesting mechanics for a racing game, including motion controls, it was a tremendous flop. Many critics took issue with the sluggish feel of the game and lack of incorporating the infamous DK bongos despite compatibility with the Wii and the absence of online play in an increasingly online world. However, this hasn't stopped dedicated fans from maintaining the cult-like obsession over this lackluster racing installment for the series. It may not be the best performing, but it certainly is not without community supporters. But as Nintendo has proven in the past, one bad release won't keep them down for long. Swinging back into action with the innovative L&R button controls seen in DK King of Swing, Nintendo released a sequel on this creative title known as DK Jungle Climber in late 2007. This time, it gets weird. The mechanics are the same, you swing from left to right a lot and have to tackle various puzzles using these controls, but instead of simply facing King K. Rool head-on, you now have to assist a sentient banana, known as Xananab, and aid him in his attempt at retrieving his crystal banana, which was stolen by, you guessed it, King K. Rool. The game features a number of playable characters, offering some variety and a decent amount of worlds and levels, which allow for longer playtime than the previous game. This also led to much greater reception from the community. Many reviewers praised these improvements and new content, often touting how much better this game was than King of Swing. Clearly, things were going well for Nintendo when it came to handheld games, so they decided to revisit and expand another familiar series. Except this time, this title was only available for download on the DSi. That's right, even though the minis were marching again in 2009, players were forced to download this game through the DSi shop. Thankfully, Nintendo does allow transfer of DSi files to other DS consoles, so if you later purchased a 3DS or DS XL, you could experience the game on a bigger screen or better hardware. While the Lemming-style concept is similar to previous titles in the series, this game is slightly different. Instead of controlling the minis themselves, the player modifies the environment around around them, a feature that allows players to create their own levels if they prefer to as well. The unfortunate downside of this game being digital only is the forced scarcity that occurred when Nintendo shut down the DSi shop in March of 2017 and later removed the game entirely from the 3DS eShop in March of 2023. This game is now no longer legitimately available for purchase or acquisition. Knowing Nintendo's aggressive policies and actions regarding emulation, some community members have expressed concerns at the legal gray area, especially considering the positive reviews it received upon launch. What was Nintendo thinking? We may never know. It's possible they learned their lesson early on, or at least appeared to. In 2010, Nintendo released Mario vs. Donkey Kong Miniland Mayhem. This time, no download required, but the game did feature Wi-Fi connectivity so players could share their custom levels online if they wanted. Plus, players are able to draw their way through each level using their touchscreens as a means to navigate the minis to their destinations. This was arguably one of the most successful Mario vs. Donkey Kong games ever made by Nintendo, as it received glowing reviews from publications regarding the content, the gameplay, and the colorful environment, which provided the perfect excuse for Nintendo to produce an additional 3 titles in the series. But now it's time to discuss a title that's been remade more than once and will soon debut in a few days with a fresh new look. Released in November 2010, Donkey Kong Country Returns was developed by Retro Studios. After more than a decade without a true Donkey Kong Country sequel, this game marked a significant comeback for the series and a complete reinvention of the franchise for the modern era. With enhanced visuals, tighter controls, and a more dynamic level design, the game stayed true to its roots, but it was more than just a nostalgia trip. It was a game that stood and still stands on its own. The game introduces several new mechanics like the ability to shake the Wiimote to perform powerful moves. Donkey Kong can slam the ground, blow wind to activate platforms, and even roll through enemies with the flick of a wrist. Plus, Diddy Kong isn't just there for moral support, he boosts Donkey Kong's jump and helps with his own unique ability. The game also makes use of the Wii's power, delivering smooth animations and stunning visuals that were unheard of on the system. Every level has a unique look, from vibrant jungles to dark, haunted temples. But how will this game hold up when the HD version drops in a couple days? Join me right here on this channel where I'll be streaming Donkey Kong Country Returns HD this January 16th. I hope to see you all there, but for now, let's get back on track. If Donkey Kong Country Returns was a revival, Tropical Freeze was a revolution. The game keeps the series' classic side-scrolling gameplay intact, but introduces new mechanics and characters that bring on a different type of monkey business. And what better way to celebrate Donkey Kong's birthday than with a more challenging and expansive version of an already popular hit game?
That attention to detail is everywhere in Tropical Freeze. This is up there with Luigi's Mansion 3 as one of the best looking games on the Switch, even though it was actually a Wii U game. The levels in this, you know what I'm saying?
Now that we've covered all of the initial titles in the Donkey Kong legacy, including the spin-offs, let's take a moment to appreciate some of the forgotten titles in the series. Donkey Kong was so immensely popular shortly after release that Nintendo couldn't keep up with demand and did something unexpected to handle it. They partnered with a Japanese company called Falcon for help and allowed them to distribute licensed clones throughout Japan, rebranded as Crazy Kong. To the untrained eye, this game is almost indistinguishable from the original, with minor changes made to allow for differentiation. However, the first installment had its complications, which led to some backlash. For example, none of the levels had background music like Donkey Kong, the hit registers were not as accurate as the original, and you could even touch Donkey Kong in the 100-meter levels without getting hurt. Falcon quickly reacted to these mistakes by releasing Crazy Kong 2 in the same year. This turned out to be a much more visually appealing release that addressed a lot of the issues in Crazy Kong 1. These reproduction machines were a hit, just like the original, but this success was quickly soured by Falcon's breach of contract when they began releasing machines in the United States, which they were not allowed to do. But that didn't stop them. Even after Nintendo terminated their contract in 1982, Falcon released Crazy Kong Jr. using Crazy Kong characters, which led to a lawsuit by Nintendo. On June 1st, 1982, Nintendo filed an injunction against Falcon to prevent further unlawful production, and the injunction was granted just 4 days later. Falcon attempted a countersuit, which was then won by Nintendo, eventually leading to the arrest of Falcon's president for having unauthorized copies of Donkey Kong Jr. on printed circuit boards. He was later found guilty and sent to prison. In the same month that Nintendo submitted their injunction against Falcon, Nintendo of America filed a similar complaint against El Kond Industries for selling Crazy Kong boards unlawfully. Kond fought it, but the suit quickly escalated to the Supreme Court, where Nintendo was granted another victory, thus adding to their vicious courtroom reputation. One of the more curious games that never saw the light of day was this Lost title from 1983. Nintendo seemed interested in exploring music-oriented games in addition to traditional edutainment, and planned to release Donkey Kong's Music Play by December of 1983, according to a long-lost brochure. This promotional ad was discovered in 2018 by GameHistory.org thanks to an anonymous donor, and showcases only a handful of proposed screens from a game that never was. Perhaps this idea was shelved and later turned into Donkey Konga in the early 2000s. Another interesting example of third-party licensing by Nintendo is Donkey Kong 3 Great Counter-Strike. This game was produced by Hudson Soft and released exclusively in Japan, which makes it a rare title for most. But what makes this game particularly different is not only the gameplay, but the consoles it used. The early 1980s were a fascinating time for home computing. By the time this pseudo-sequel to the original Donkey Kong 3 was released, the market was flooded with a variety of personal computers like the Commodore 64, IBM's PC Junior, and Apple's iconic Macintosh computer. Blessed with seemingly unlimited choices, Hudson Soft decided to release their game on a variety of machines, such as the IBM JX, Sharp X1, and the PC 6000. Being a Japanese exclusive release likely did not help with sales, but the unintentional scarcity did allow for the growth of a legendary tale behind this rare complement to the DK legacy, leaving dedicated fans dying to get their hands on it. But the true fans know the rarest cartridge of them all. The Donkey Kong Country competition cartridge is a minimalistic variant of Donkey Kong Country made for exclusive use in the Nintendo PowerFest 1994 game competition, and later featured in the Blockbuster World Video Game Championships 2 event. Following the end of the latter contest, copies of the competition cartridge were sold in a Nintendo Power subscribers catalog, but only 2,500 copies were ever made, making it one of the most desirable collector's items to date. And of course, we can't forget the countless ports of Donkey Kong to every system imaginable, from the limited capabilities of arcade machines to the iconic Nintendo Switch. Donkey Kong remains a permanent legacy and facet in video game history. One thing is for sure, whether he's throwing barrels, riding bongos, or crushing crocs, he's always got a place in our hearts and on our screens. Thanks for watching.